Hey, welcome to the Eddie Hyatt podcast. I am your host and teacher, and I'm so glad you joined me today. Hey, and I'm excited about some teaching that I'm going to do over the next several days on the subject of marriage and sexuality. This is the month of June, and there is a community that has defined June as what they call Pride Month, in which the LGBTQ view perception of marriage and sexuality is celebrated. So, we need to know what the Bible says. The Bible is our basis for all of life, for every area of our life. And the Bible addresses clearly this issue. And if we want to have the best life possible, if we want to have a life that is fulfilling, we can't throw out what God has said. And so I'm approaching this in a proactive manner. Uh, I want to emphasize what is the truth. And so I'm calling it Marriage and Sexuality according to Genesis, Jesus, and Paul. So we're going to begin in Genesis. We'll look at what Jesus said. We'll look at what Paul said about marriage and sexuality. You know, if we look back at the very beginning, in creation, because it's important, that we believe in a creator and creation. Now, if you are an evolutionist and you believe that we are here by chance, that we just evolved over a long period of time, then you in yourself, you're going to be free to come up with just about anything that you want to believe about life, including marriage and sexuality. But you see, I believe, and it is the truth. It's been validated throughout history that we are created beings. We were created by an intelligent being, by the God of the Bible. And if we want to know how to get the best and to experience the most out of life, we have to go back to the blueprint. We have to go back to the blueprint, to the instruction manual of our Creator. Stu and I just recently bought a vehicle, and it came with an owner's manual that has all kinds of instructions telling us how to get the best service out of that vehicle. Now, we can ignore that, throw it away if we want to, and say, well, we'll drive this vehicle how we want to drive it. We'll change the oil every 25,000 miles if we want to. We're paying for it. Yeah, we can take that approach and and not get the most enjoyment out of it. Turn it into a rattle trap in a very short time before it's ever paid off. But if we want to get the most out of it, we need to follow the guidelines and follow the owner's manual. And the Bible is like the owner's manual. It's like the creator's manual that he has made available to us. And so we would be wise to follow his instructions. And so we're going to start in Genesis today, and I'm going to try to keep these episodes between 12 and 15 minutes. And so in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, this is the verse that begins with the creation of humanity. Genesis, the first few chapters, is about creation. And in Genesis 1:26, I'm reading from the New King James. It says, "And God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and let them, notice it says them, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, and over everything that creeps upon the earth." Now, here's what I want to point out. Because the King James and the New King James has made a poor translation of the word Adam in this verse, they've translated it man, when it actually means person or humanity. There is a Hebrew word for man as male, and it is ish. The Hebrew word for woman as female is isha. Neither of those words is used here. The word that is used here is Adam, which means people or person. And so that is why the NIV has more correctly translated it as, and God said, let us make mankind in our image and after our likeness. The New Living Translation says, "And let us make human beings in our image and after our likeness." The New Revised Standard Version says, "Let us make humankind in our image and after our likeness." Now, this is verified that this is not about the creation of the first male. It's about the creation of the human species, and this is verified by the what's called the Septuagint. This is a Greek translation of the Old Testament that was produced around 250 years before the time of Christ by 70 Jewish scholars. It was produced in Alexandria, Egypt, and these 70 Jewish scholars, they were educated in both Hebrew and Greek. And by the way, most of the quotations that we read in the New Testament are not from the Hebrew Old Testament. They're from this Greek translation, the Septuagint, which shows that the early church highly valued this Greek translation of the Old Testament. And how did they translate this word Adam? They translated it as anthropos, which is the Greek word for person or humanity. The Greek word for man is aner. And if this was about the creation of the first man, uh, they they would have translated it as aner. But these Hebrew, Greek, Jewish scholars 250 years before Christ, they understood this as being about the creation of the human species. And notice he goes on and says, and he tells us that there are two expressions of this human species. He made according to our image and likeness. Let them and God said, "Let us make mankind in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion," and so on. And then verse 27. So God created again Adam in His own image. In the image of God, He created them, male and female. He created them, and so in creation there are only two sexes. There are only two genders. Now, most people today, they will argue, well, gender is fluid. There can be many genders. No, no, I don't buy that at all. There are two scientific biological sexes. I mean, um, if you want to get into the scientific area, which I'm not going into, I'm not a scientist. I am a biblical scholar, a theologian, but women scientifically have two X chromosomes. Men have an X and a Y chromosome. So biologically, physically, biologically, scientifically, there are two sexes, there are two genders. And this is in line with the creation story. And when we begin to go against, when we throw aside the creation story, the creation account, and we start violating God's word, we start violating nature, and we start violating the creation order, we're going to create problems for ourselves. And that is already happening, coming out into the open. So, God, this is about the creation of the human species. Now, this is very important for different reasons, which we will get into. And I just want to tell one thing before we close this episode, why this is important. I remember hearing a well-known pastor. This has been some years ago. I was in my car, and he was interpreting this as being the creation of the first male. And what you will read as we continue to read through this passage, it uses plural pronouns, them. Let's go ahead and read it, and so you hear it. Verse 27. So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God, He created him, male and female, He created them. Now listen at verse 28. So then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So that God gave the same blessing, the same rights, the same privileges to both male and female, the human species that He had created. Now, because the King James and the New King James translated this word as man, many have thought uh, for many decades, and I guess you could say centuries, that this was talking about the first male being created. And I heard this pastor, well-known pastor, he was talking about how that men have this, because it talks about let them, it says, actually says, let them have dominion. Um, but he's talking about that the man has this desire to have dominion and to conquer. And he was implying that this is not in the woman, this is just in the man. And then he went on to make this amazing statement. As though he was trying to encourage the women. And he said, you ladies out there, maybe your husband has had an illicit affair with another woman. What you need to realize was that's not necessarily about love. That is a part of his desire to have dominion and to conquer. And I thought, wow, if this person knew anything about the original Hebrew and about the Greek, he would know that there is no biblical basis for what he is saying. The God gave the same authority, the same blessing, and the same mandate to both male and female. Here in the beginning, before sin came into the world, we'll get into Genesis 3 when sin came into the world, but here in the very beginning, before sin came into the world, we see perfect harmony. We see perfect mutuality between the two sexes. They are different. Yes, they complement one another, but they have the same authority, and they have the same blessing, and they have the same mandate from God. They obviously are to work in a partnership. That was the original vision. And in Matthew chapter 15, we'll talk about this more later when we talk about Jesus and marriage and sexuality. Jesus was talking to some religious leaders, and actually the question was about divorce. But in this whole discussion about divorce and about marriage and sexuality, Jesus told them twice that they needed to go back to the beginning, how it was in the beginning before sin came into the world and disrupted the created order as God had originally meant it to be. So, folks, Genesis has some very powerful teachings about marriage and sexuality that should be a guide for us today. And I look forward to continuing this teaching tomorrow about marriage and sexuality according to Genesis, Jesus, and Paul. We have some books. If you'd like to follow up and read more about this, check out my wife Susan's book, 500 pages, originally based on her doctoral dissertation from the School of Divinity at Regent University. 500 plus pages. It's called In the Spirit We're Equal. Be sure you get the second edition, uh, which came 20 years after the first edition. In the Spirit We're Equal, second edition. I also have a book that is called Who's the Boss? And it is a study of Ephesians chapter 5. There are other books we have on this, but those are two important ones. But just go to our website, my name, EddieHyatt.com. These books are also available on Amazon, and there are other resources there. They'll be a great blessing to you, and I'll look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. God bless you.